You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. In 1924, Austrian philosopher and esotericist Rudolf Steiner delivered a series of groundbreaking lectures to a group of farmers in Kobowice, now in modern-day Poland. His lectures, known as the Agriculture Course, laid the foundations of biodynamic farming, a system of agriculture that aimed to synthesize practical farming techniques with science and spirituality. I'm Ben Eagle. I'm a podcast producer focused on farming and rural affairs, and as Biodynamic celebrates its 100th anniversary this year, I set out to learn more about this little profiled area of agricultural practice. This is 100 Years of Biodynamic Farming. Episode 2. Biodynamic Farming Today and Tomorrow. Welcome back to 100 Years of Biodynamic Farming. In this episode, we'll explore the present and future of the biodynamic movement to see how biodynamic principles, developed by Rudolf Steiner a century ago, are applied today and think ahead to the future of the movement. We'll be hearing from farmers and growers at Plaw Hatch Farm in Sussex and Loch Arthur and Scroggie Hall in Scotland, as well as representatives from the Biodynamic Association. To start us off, let's find out how significant biodynamic farming is in the UK today. Executive Director of the Biodynamic Association, Gabriel Kaye, told me more.
Biodynamic farming in the UK is a very small movement, but within the approach that one calls anthroposophy, which is a philosophy and a way of looking at the world and caring for the world, biodynamics is the practical agricultural end of it. And then there's approaches bringing this understanding of human beings and the world through medicine, through education, through the arts, through science. So there are many different things, just as the world is a complex place. So it is with any philosophy that wants to cover that. There are 90 certified Demeter market gardens, vineyards and farms. Some of them quite small, some of them quite big. The biggest one is 670 hectare. So that's over 1,500 acres. So there's the full scale of different sizes of farms, gardens, market gardens, some of them massively productive, some of them quite small. Vineyards, more and more biodynamic vineyards. So there is a wide variety on the agricultural side, but then there's all the processing that goes alongside that. So the butchers, the slaughterhouses, the wine makers, the juice makers, the cheese makers, the bread makers. The certification side of the activity covers all of that, and also the trading where certification is needed.
One of the best-known biodynamic farms in the UK is Plaw Hatch in Sussex, the sister farm of another well-known farm called Tablehurst. Plaw Hatch is 200 acres in area and lies on the edge of the Ashdown Forest. The farm has dairy cows, laying hens, sheep, pigs, arable and a market garden in which 45 different types of vegetables, fruits, flowers and herbs are grown. 95% of the garden produce and much of the other produce from the farm is sold through an on-site farm shop. The farm is managed by a number of farmers and growers, all of whom have responsibility for a different part of the enterprise. I was interested in learning about the farmers themselves, and so joined a call with Gala Bailey Barker, Louisa Ellerker and Emma Hams. I asked them each how they first became interested in biodynamic farming and growing.
I'm Emma Hams, and I'm one of the garden managers here at Plaw Hatch. I first became interested in biodynamic farming and growing when I started studying at Warmerdorf, a biodynamic agriculture college in the Netherlands. I was 16 and I wasn't sure that I wanted to be a farmer, but my interest started growing from there.
I'm Gala Bailey Barker and I'm one of the farmers here at Plaw Hatch Farm. I mean, I went to a Steiner school, so I'm kind of aware of biodynamic farming in a sort of general way. I'd always wanted to be a farmer, but I could never figure out how to get into farming. Not from a farming family, and didn't know anyone who had any land and didn't have any money. Quite clear I didn't want to do conventional agriculture. And when I finished university, I picked up the Tablehurst and Plor Hatch book. There's a book about the two farms, and was just looking through it and thought, oh, that's really interesting, and came to volunteer, and I've been here for nearly 12 years.
I'm Louisa Ellerker, and I'm one of the farmers here at Plor Hatch. I first became interested in biodynamics in my early 20s. I was kind of looking at opportunities of how to get involved with farming. So predominantly like workaways or woofing. There were always some biodynamic farms looking for people. So kind of explored a bit there. I also found Ramonderhof, the agricultural school where Emma also went. And I did a year of their part-time adult learning course. So that was kind of more of a deep dive into biodynamics. But I think the best lesson and teaching of biodynamics has been here at Plor Hatch Farm, just doing it practically day by day and kind of being within a community of people that are also interested in biodynamics.
The conversation turned to challenges, and it became clear that attracting new farmers and growers was at the forefront of their minds.
Really tragic about Brexit, particularly for biodynamic farmers in the UK, is that actually the Netherlands is the only place you can do 4-year residential biodynamic training. And obviously we haven't managed to employ Emma, but Brexit's made it all a lot more difficult for anyone to consider coming to live in the UK from the Netherlands.
I think that is basically impossible.
Yeah. I mean, we have trained a lot of farmers here. In the time I've been here, we've had a lot of people come through and go off and do farming in other places. But it's actually only these farms that are training people to do biodynamics.
I think that's the risk for the future of biodynamics, is who is going to be farming biodynamically if the kind of education structure isn't there on a scale that biodynamic farming needs.
And the training isn't that comprehensive in the sense that it is about the biodynamics, but it's not necessarily that practical. I basically just learnt on the job, but you could say that really to end up being a farmer out of just doing the BDA course, you would need to go to Agricultural College to go and be an apprentice or work for 4 years, or do quite a lot of volunteering.
Put your own school programs together.
Yeah, put your own education together. And I guess that, and it is, it's possible in some of these places, and that's what I've done over the years, is just collect all my bits of knowledge I've got about various things.
Yes.
If you were to start a biodynamic farm as a landowner who wanted to employ a biodynamic farmer, or if you want to find, if we advertise for a biodynamic farmer, we're very unlikely to find one. We might find an organic farmer who's interested in doing biodynamics, or a conventional farm, or we're going to train people from scratch.
And so far, we trained everyone from scratch.
A key characteristic of biodynamic farmers and growers is their shared interest and passion for the natural world. In episode 1, we met John and Alison Chapman, who farm at Scroggy Hall in Galloway. Here, Alison introduces the farm in more detail, but also explains what she and John are trying to achieve.
We began with pigs because they were starting to turn over the soil, and the rocks, because it's a very rocky, granity, grey, wacky place. So the pigs did very well, and they raised a family of about 10 piglets, and then we handed them on to somebody else because they had done their job. And we didn't really want to go into pig meat, but we'd already got sheep by then. And I think we started off with 30 organic sheep from our neighbour. We have photos of how it was. It was a wilderness. We've planted over 10,000 trees. We've dug it with our hands. We got huge amounts of blisters and everything else. We were trying to give back something. It's a question of balance, nothing to excess, and nothing too meagre. If you use too much manure or too much compost or whatever, you're going to ruin what you're trying to help. It really is a question of self-control and understanding and all those qualities to be a proper person. with this huge responsibility for where we are. And if we're not careful, huge responsibility for it not being there much longer.
Relatively near to Scroggy Hall is Loch Arthur, a working Camp Hill community which includes around 75 men and women, including people with learning difficulties. The estate includes a farm, large garden, a creamery, bakery, craft workshops and a farm shop and cafe. Peter Darwell has managed the farm here for many years and arrived at Loch Arthur in June 1987.
Before I came to Loch Arthur, I was in a couple of other Camp Hill places before then. And I was in Colegaladir, which is in South Wales, and I came across a leaflet which said new community starting in Scotland. Well, that sounds interesting, because I wasn't really a farmer beforehand. I'd done a little bit. Basically, I knew how to milk cows and trim sheep's toenails, and that was about my limit of my farming experience. And then I went to live in Switzerland for a year, and my wife and I then wanted to come back to Britain. And I remembered this leaflet. So basically, I came over here on my own, saw that Loch Arthur was actually, on the farming side, was actually a proper farm, looking at being a very commercial farm, working with people with learning disabilities, rather than being a farm whereby people were working in a sort of therapy way. And that's what really drew me here. And I went home and told my wife all about it. And, well, we decided to come. It was still a new place. It had only been going a couple of years. And one of those was the wettest winter ever on record. And, they were certainly looking to move forward. There was just a few cows. Some of the land was rented out, etc., etc. So there was a kind of a slow build. It wasn't anything rushed into. And what was the need? What was the need of the customers? What were the customers looking for? And since then, well, we built a big farm shop, flooded with customers. Loads of people want our produce. And we've been able to step away from working in the commercial sector, going through markets and this sort of thing. So whatever we produce now goes through our farm shop. And very rarely do we enter into that sort of world of markets and things. It's all home processed. We have our own butchery. So all our meat product, a lot of our vegetables, and we're also feeding 70 people. So that's kind of how it's done. But it's been an organic growth, really, over the years.
For Peter, the success of the farm and the farm shop in particular is down to the quality of the produce.
So it's the quality of the produce, I think, and the way we market it. We listen to our customers. It's very difficult for me to speak for the shop because that's a whole different ball game. But whatever they say into the shop, it will flow back to the farm, and we can try to give the customer what they need. I mean, it's not always possible. One of the other things is probably also that we're one of the few organic farms left in the area. This was a boom town for organic farming at one point, and most of the other farms have fallen away, and we've kind of stuck to our guns. So people will come far and wide looking for organic produce, and not just any organic produce, good quality organic produce. And I think we do pride ourselves in the quality of our product.
Loch Arthur is a successful example of a sustainable community, living and working using the principles established by Rudolf Steiner, the founder of biodynamics, 100 years ago. The community remains steadfast at around 75 people, but for Peter Darwell, the future relies on younger people coming through.
We've got a new gardener who's very, very committed. We have just had another couple come who've done their biodynamic training. And, if they manage to stay on, who knows how long someone's going to stay once they come. But it's young people coming through, young people who want to carry the impulse. I mean, old fuddy-duddies like me, who are probably sick of the back teeth for shoveling silage, during the winter. I don't mind stepping back, but I would hate to step back and that impulse wasn't carried on. It may well happen in the future. Who knows? But it really, really depends on young people coming through. And if they don't come through, then it's not going to carry on. When I kind of began my journey, there was a lot of young people involved. And I don't feel that quite is the same way as it was, or whether that communication between people is still there. We're relying on young people, and that's the bottom line, I think.
With growing concerns about climate change, biodiversity loss and the need for regenerative agriculture, many within the biodynamic movement see biodynamics as offering a pathway to a more resilient farming system. But if this is the case, how do those on the inside believe it will evolve over the coming years? Here's Gabriel Kaye from the Biodynamic Association.
So that's a really interesting question. I'm hoping that young people will really help the older people like me find new ways of sharing, and also find ways of sharing that the science can now really show us, so that showing that the science can prove what we have seen happening basically for 100 years as being something that's not so mysterious, that anyone with goodwill can achieve on their farm, and that it's not going to be a financial disaster if you want to shift from conventional farming to organic or to biodynamic, and that you're not going to lose several years of income. That's not necessary. You can't sell your produce as biodynamic the first day you start doing biodynamic, but you can still go on selling your produce, and it's going to get better and better, and your farm's going to get better and better. And when you've completed the conversion, officially certified Demeter, you can sell it as Demeter, as biodynamic, and it's got better shelf life, it's got lots of taste, it's really alive produce, and people buy it because they appreciate it.
For Alison and John Chapman, the biodynamic movement is bigger than itself. Indeed, the conversation should be about the kind of society and humanity we want to exist as.
It's not just for biodynamic people to talk to biodynamic people. They should already be sharing the same kind of conversation. It's about the message that we're all in it together. John's latest book, The Last Chapter, it's about a guy who changed sides in the First World War. And he just calls the last chapter, "We are all our own worst enemies." And that really is, if you like, what we have finally found a rationale, and other people who think the same way. And I'm sure that Goethe, Carlyle and Steiner and lots of people since and before, probably, many before Goethe, he must have got his ideas from somewhere. It's the experience of a life, a different life from what is very often the rat bag of competition that university teachers very often experience. It shouldn't be like that. It should be cooperative, compassionate.
And not just based on the notion of getting money, of financial benefit, seen as the end rather than the means to a better end.
Yeah. So, over to you.
Overarching the whole conversation around biodynamics is a conversation not just about the way that food is produced, but about our whole relationship with food as a society and as individuals. Gabriel Kaye.
In the UK, we experience our relationship with food in a totally different way to most of the European countries, where there's still ancestral connection to the home farm, to grandmother or grandfather or great-grandfather maybe who lived on a farm. Whether you're in Poland or in France or Germany or Switzerland, that relationship to the land as providing food is still there. Whereas Britain is much more post-industrial, and for the majority of the population, the urban population, and to some extent even the rural population, that relationship to the land as providing one's nourishment is broken. You go to the food in the supermarket. And just recently, I was talking to a local councillor who was saying that some young people didn't need to dig up part of a field to grow vegetables because you could get it at the supermarket. His connection to food was from the supermarket, not from the field. And this is really what underpins the British approach to cheap food. We see it as a commercial operation. We see it as the supermarkets are making money out of it. We want it cheaper. Whereas if you see it as food coming from the land, you have a whole different relationship with it. And it's not about cheap. It's about value. It's about quality. It's about nourishment. And that's where the biodynamic world lives. It's about this nourishment. How can you be healthy if you are eating food that has been through 3 factories and been denatured? And yes, it's sold to you cheap, but there's nothing left of the real grain. There's nothing left of the real fats, whether they're rapeseed oil or sunseed oil or animal fats. There's nothing really of the nature of those things left. They've been denatured through the processes. And this is what Chris van Tulleken explains in his book. And this is what biodynamics has been about from the beginning. It's about healthy food that nourishes you so that you are able to be healthy, so that you can think healthily, not just digest healthily. And it's really, really important. And this is why it's really good if we can build our connection back to where our food comes from, that we can see where it comes from, that children can experience that beetroot and carrots and lettuce come from the soil. It is so important to their future understanding and health, and to our respect of nature and the world. If we see food as an industrial process, we're not going to respect nature.
Our story began with Rudolf Steiner, the man whose lectures at Kobovitz spearheaded biodynamic agriculture a century ago. The world and agriculture generally has completely changed since that time. So what is the legacy of Steiner's lectures? Here's Bernard Jarman, author of The Biodynamic Movement in Britain, A History of the First 100 Years.
I think it's very much an approach for agriculture for the future. It's not trying to go back to what was there. We have the big problem of the whole chemical agriculture is basically destroying the humus of the soil and the health of animals, plants and humans ultimately. And the move towards organic is a means of stopping that process. And the more organic we can have, the less destruction will go on. So you can keep things moving. But organic on itself, I don't think is quite enough to give that impetus to improve the vitality of the plants and animals and the quality of the food which is needed. So that's where then the biodynamic comes in, which is something which then can really lead into the future.
Biodynamic farming could be seen as a niche within a niche, a sect of organic farming. Some would certainly look at some of its more spiritual and esoteric elements and raise an eye, but this episode has shown that those within it believe in its benefits and experience them day to day. From Plor Hatch to Loch Arthur, from researchers to community leaders, the movement continues 100 years on from Rudolf Steiner's lectures and argues for its relevance now more than ever. I hope this series has given you insight into the past and present of biodynamic farming, and you will now reflect on the role that it might play in our agricultural future. I'm Ben Eagle from RuralPod Media, and this has been 100 years of biodynamic farming. Thank you for joining me, and if you enjoyed this mini-series, please subscribe to the Meet the Farmers podcast, leave us a comment wherever you're listening, and listen to one of the dozens of other farming stories in our archive. This podcast was presented and produced by Ben Eagle for RuralPod Media. To find out more about our work, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk or find our podcasts on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Special thanks to everybody who contributed to this series, including Gabriel Kaye, Bernard Jarman, Berni Courts, Alison and John Chapman, Emma Hams, Gala Bailey Barker, Louisa Ellerker, Peter Darwell and Cattherine Powell. Thanks also to Hawkwood College and the Biodynamic Association, and particular thanks to Alison and John Chapman, who spearheaded the idea for this series in the first place. The music for the series was from Flying Heads and CW Music Productions.